Kirsty, let's sum up Washington today, a somber city, a city that's clearing up. Let's sum it up in three sounds. The first is the sound of ripcords being pulled as one after another people close to Donald Trump are bailing out, even though it's only 2 weeks until the administration is scheduled to come into land. Chief among them, former White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, who resigned his position as US Northern Envoy, saying he could no longer go on supporting the president. The second is the clatter of mechanical bolts being tightened. All around this building, a new 7-foot-high fence is being erected, and the promise that inauguration security will be impenetrable. The third sound, well, it's silence. Silence from Donald Trump. That may be because his social media accounts have been suspended. But in the last few minutes, his press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, said this from the White House press room podium.
Those who violently besieged our Capitol are the opposite of everything this administration stands for. The core value of our administration is the idea that all citizens have the right to live in safety, peace, and freedom. Those who are working in this building are working to ensure an orderly transition of power. Now it is time for America to unite, to come together, to reject the violence that we have seen. We are one American people under God. Thank you very much.
And with that, she took no questions from the press, even though there are many, many questions. Well, away from the man we might term the president-reject, we did hear from the president-elect, Joe Biden.
Yesterday, in my view, one of the darkest days in the history of our nation. An unprecedented assault on our democracy. An assault literally on the citadel of liberty in the United States Capitol itself.
So what led to yesterday's riot, yesterday's insurrection? Well, yesterday I trailed a group of those who were involved in the scenes around this building, around Capitol Hill, the Proud Boys. And it's clear to me that what happens after this, well, it doesn't end with Donald Trump departing the White House. Here's my report, but first, a warning. My film does contain strong language.
Out of your boy!
Marching on the Capitol. As I watched yesterday, around 200 mostly men, some armed with clubs, headed for the seat of American government. This moment has been a long time brewing. Donald Trump is a cause and a symptom. He has harnessed an anger that pre-exists his presidency, but then he has given it constant encouragement and nourishment.
Slow it down on the left.
These are the Proud Boys, a group of, they say, American patriots. Others call them far-right nationalist thugs. They are the group the president told ominously to stand back and stand by during the election campaign. Now they want to overturn the result of the election. Some are clearly ready for trouble.
What's the message today?
We're representing the spirit of 1776. If you haven't noticed, real men are here.
On the way to the Capitol, they stopped for photographs.
Again, we thank you for the wonderful nation we've all been blessed to be in.
And then for a prayer. They believe they are doing God's work. The US Capitol Police were completely unprepared. They rushed to get on their riot gear, even as the Proud Boys marched past them.
USA! USA!
At the Capitol, the Proud Boys merged with others who gathered. What struck me is how many here believe the conspiracies.
What do you think happened yesterday?
Followed the exact same pattern that our presidential election did. Vote dump, same thing.
You think?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. But when the Secretary of State says it was all fair, does that...
He's crooked.
He's complicit.
Yep, he's complicit. You can tie most of our upper government there right back to CCP.
The Communist Party of
Yes, sir.
China.
This is the mistrust that Donald Trump harnesses. It is, as much as the presidency, the source of his power. It is directed at Congress, at corporate America, and above all, at the media. Some in the crowd did not want me there.
We've got to stand together.
Get out. I'm not going to let you take it no matter what. Your life is going to be pure hell every minute that you're here.
We are the news now.
In the melee, a woman screams, "We are the news." What she means, I think, is that the people no longer need the media to tell them what's happening. What we're seeing is the impact of a tsunami of information unleashed by the internet. Some of it false, but some of it true.
The people that sit in that building, I think they're so separated, and many of them, I think, feel above us. I mean, you look at the way those people live, and if you look at the salaries of these people, and then you're hearing about all these millionaires that come out of that building, something ain't right.
Martin Gurry is a former CIA analyst. In 2014, he wrote an influential book called The Revolt of the Public, which described the conditions that would lead to Donald Trump and Brexit. He says this revolt doesn't end with the Trump presidency.
It continues. It continues. I mean, you have an elite class that seems very, very out of touch. The public dwells and moves at the speed of light online in a contentious, uproarious digital world. The elites live in this world which is essentially a legacy of the 20th century, where you think you have access to information that nobody has. You have cozy relationships with other elites like the media, and you live in splendid personal isolation. The public is angry, the elites don't get it.
The cost of what happened yesterday is huge. Outside the entrance to the House of Representatives, you can see the bloodstains that tell of a woman shot and killed. The damage inside will be more easily fixed. What can mend America's democracy, though, is a far tougher question.
Our US correspondent, David Grossman. I'm joined now by Kathleen Sebelius, who was President Obama's Secretary of Health, and Brendan Buck, senior aide to the last two Republican House Speakers. Good evening to both of you. If I can just bring you back to what's going to happen in the next few days. Brendan Bush, what do you think is the most, Brendan Buck, what is the most likely scenario for Donald Trump?
Well, there's a lot of talk right now about invoking the 25th Amendment of our Constitution, which would basically remove him from office ahead of the end of his term. I think that's highly unlikely. I am starting to get the sense that at least people around the president and the White House understand that what happened in the last day was a crisis that is going to forever tarnish the president, all of those people around him, and it feels like they are receding a little bit. Now, whether or not Donald Trump feels any remorse for what he did, I don't know. But it feels like Washington is finally standing up to him a little bit, to the point that potentially there will be enough pushback to keep him in check for the next 13 days. The fact that people are talking about removing him is quite extraordinary. So now we hopefully will start a process of moving forward as one country to a new president. Now that Congress has affirmed the vote affirmatively that Joe Biden is going to be the next president, hopefully we can move towards that in a peaceful way.
So you talk about Washington finally standing up to him. What you really mean is that some Republicans are now finally standing up to him, and there is a kind of roll call of people who've finally spoken out. So we've got Elaine Chao, the Transport Secretary, Mick Mulvaney, US Envoy to Northern Ireland, Tyler Goodspeed, Chair of the White House Economic Advisors. There are a number of people here. But actually, do you think a lot of Republicans have deep regret and look into their souls and say, well, actually, a lot of Republicans, you two, I suppose I could say, have been enablers?
Yeah, I'm hoping that this is a clarifying moment. I mean, it is important, and your report just now hit on it perfectly. The issue is that Donald Trump's power rests in the people who support him. And the people who support him are the ones that typically vote for Republicans. And so it's not as though Republicans in Congress particularly like Donald Trump or are charmed by him or think he's a good leader. It's that they know they can't alienate those voters who send them to Washington in the first place. But I think this may be a clarifying moment where enough of them have seen what all of this lying over the last 2 months, the lying over the last 4 years has wrought. It is ugly and painful And maybe now we can start having a conversation about what the Republican Party looks like going forward after Donald Trump. We're not going to be able to have a clean break. I think it's a long road ahead, but at least maybe now we can start to have that conversation.
And we'll certainly be talking a bit about that later in the program. But Kathleen Sebelius, if I can come to you now, we're hearing that the possibility that the 25th Amendment might be invoked, and then, of course, Mike Pence has to ratify that along with a majority of the cabinet. Nancy Pelosi is saying tonight, if that is not the case, then they want to go for impeachment. I mean, do you think that's the right strategy?
Well, I would agree with my colleague who just spoke that it's quite unlikely. We have less than 2 weeks before the inauguration of our new president. And while I think a number of us have predicted really for the last 4 years that the most dangerous time in the Trump administration would be if he were to be defeated between Election Day and Inauguration Day, I don't know that anyone ever imagined this assault on the Capitol that we saw yesterday invoked by the President of the United States. But I would just say that half of the elected House Republicans continued yesterday, in spite of the assault on the Capitol, to vote to overturn a free and fair election. 8 United States senators voted, all Republicans, to overturn a free and fair election. And I am horrified by the fact that I know that people say, well, maybe now people have come to their senses about Donald Trump. We had a tape recording released by the Georgia Republican elected Secretary of State, where the President of the United States on Saturday called upon an election official to fraudulently flip the election in Georgia, to just find him over 11,000 votes. That would be voter fraud in any circumstance. It would be stealing an election. We don't even remember that that occurred several days ago because of the horrors that have followed. This presidency was started with the president lying to the American public. It has continued. People around him have allowed mistruths to be told over and over again, have allowed the president to create his own reality. And I think he is seriously unhinged at this point.
Well, let me just put that about being seriously unhinged. Let me just put that straight now to Brendan Buck. You know, we've heard a Republican said, well, you said tonight that he was out of his mind. What do you make of President Trump's state of mind?
I don't think any of this is actually out of character for him. I have been on the listening end of too many phone calls to know that he is a person who has had very casual relationship with reality. He is very often detached. He surrounds himself with people who tell him what he wants to hear. He pays attention only to media that worships him.
Sorry to interrupt you then. Can I just ask on that very point then? What we know now about what Zuckerberg's doing. We know now about Facebook, and we know what's happening about his tweets. How will he react to this attempt to silence him, do you think?
Yeah, it makes me a little uncomfortable. That's a really short-sighted. I understand why they took it away from him. It's really short-sighted. I think the likely thing is it's going to anger him, and he's going to find a way to get out. You can't muzzle him forever. Now, I understand the national security and the public safety reason why they did it, but the idea that you can just shut him up is nonsense. And so we're going to have to face what he has to say. I'm hoping now after this, and he's seen so many people basically rebuke him, very close friends of his in the Senate, that at least for the next 13 days he'll back off.
I wonder if you're so sanguine about that, Kathleen Sebelius. If he'll be angered by this, the danger is presumably, if he isn't censured, that actually he will give succor to insurrectionists. And we have now got 13 days to the inauguration. What do you think will happen? I mean, do you have fears for the inauguration?
Well, I have fears for the country right now. As long as Donald Trump has access to the nuclear code, the ability to call out the military, I also think we are at a dangerous, dangerous place in this country. We didn't even talk about the fact that yesterday we had 4,000 COVID-related deaths, the highest death toll we've ever had. We have hospitals that are ravaged. So we have a president who not only is given up on the American public and given up on being president, but creating a false narrative and inciting violence. It is a very dangerous period. And while I don't have great hopes that the Congress or the cabinet would move fast enough for either impeachment or for the 25th Amendment to be invoked, I do think we are at a very dangerous point, and yesterday did not end it.
So
and
we know these people are still in the Capitol. We know a lot of the people that were on that march are still on the rioters are still in the Capitol.
That's right.
In terms of the security, finally there's security in Capitol Hill. Do you think there's danger that there will be further, well, it'll be skirmishes now, presumably, because the Guard will be much, much more on their guard?
Well, I think there could easily be skirmishes. I guess I'm not as worried about the inauguration itself as I am about the 13 days between now and then, when you have the President of the United States suggesting that you have to fight to take back the country, that you have to fight to save the election steal, who began discrediting the election long before November and suggesting that there would be massive voter fraud if people mailed in their ballots. This has been fomented for a long time and advocated by Republican after Republican after Republican. So I find it very disingenuous that now people are saying, oh my heavens, we're horrified by what happened. They are absolutely enablers, and way too many of them are still enabling the President of the United States.
Thank you both very much indeed for joining us tonight.